Dragon Ball FighterZ is a 2D 3v3 fighting game developed by Arc System Works and published by Bandai Namco Entertainment. Those of you who follow me on Twitter also know that it's a game I've been playing religiously for the past week thanks to the early access review copy Bandai gave me. This is a game that many people, including myself, have been following very closely since it was first announced, and for many people it's something of a dream come true. When I first heard that Arc Sys was developing a Dragon Ball fighting game, I cannot tell you how excited I was. Many people have shown the same attitude toward this game as I have, though I've seen a handful of people who don't typically play traditional 2D fighters, but generally enjoy Dragon Ball games who seem a little bit more skeptical about this one. So without wasting any more time, let's just start discussing how good Dragon Ball FighterZ really is. I'll start with story mode since it's what I consider to be the game's weakest aspect. Now, there are two ways you can look at what I'm about to say. The story mode will typically run you about 9 hours, and that can be either a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you feel about it. Since completing the story mode is mandatory to unlock Android 21, it's something that you're going to eventually have to sink 9 hours into. I have heard a few whispers about a game guide that supposedly comes with an early unlock code for Android 21, so this might be a pretty easy alternative to that, but if you don't feel like paying for the guide just to get to play as her early, then this is something you're gonna have to sit down and finish. And now, 9 hours is a lot of time. On one hand, you could view it as a lot of single-player content, which is definitely a good sign that you'll be getting your money's worth out of this game, but on the other hand, you could look at it as something that you have to spend 9 hours on that you don't want to spend 9 hours on. It's not a very difficult story mode, as a matter of fact. All but the last few fights against Android 21 are pretty easy, and since most of the fights are against the silent clones of the main cast, who say nothing, have no personality, and seem to have been made solely to fight, 9 hours of mindless combat against computers who aren't very good at the game can start to drag very, very quickly. Now, the story mode is littered with really cool scenes of characters interacting with one another. Some characters who you'd never expect to talk to one another. A lot of these character interactions, as a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say all of these character interactions are extremely cool. Some of them are mandatory parts of the story that you'll have to watch no matter what, but others depend on your current team setup and also on the enemy you're fighting at the time. I won't spoil any here, but a lot of the conversations are really cool, sometimes really funny, and generally offer just enough incentive to keep you playing through the story, aside from the fact that you'll be unlocking Android 21. The story plays out sort of like Budokai 2's does, and plops you onto a board game-like map that you're free to explore one space at a time. You can fight as many enemies as you wish, or avoid as many enemies as possible, depending on how long you want the story mode to take. There are a handful of maps that force you to fight one enemy after another, and while these are by far my least favorite part of the story mode, they're pretty rare, so I can't knock it too hard for this. The plot of the story mode itself isn't anything spectacular. It's basically just run-of-the-mill Dragon Ball filler, so overall I'd say this story mode is a pretty mixed bag. It's enjoyable, but it's definitely something that you'll be glad to be done with once you're finished. This is hands down, and quite obviously, the best-looking Dragon Ball game ever released, without any competition to speak of at all. Everything about the game looks beautiful. The characters, the attacks, the environments, and all of the animations are gorgeous. Not only did Arc Sys make sure the game itself looks stunning, but the game is also packed with a bunch of attention to detail. There are countless references and nods to the original source material, and a bunch of stuff that's clearly just there to show that the staff over at Arc Sys is made up of a bunch of people who are huge Dragon Ball fans, and were really passionate about making this game as good as it could be. I'd feel terrible giving the game anything less than the highest of praise in this category, and I honestly don't even think I needed to talk about it. You can see for yourself just how pretty the game is to look at, so I won't spend any more time talking about this. As with its presentation, I'd give the game pretty high scores in this category too. The soundtrack is pretty great, the voice acting is phenomenal in both English and Japanese, and the sound effects for everything in the game are all spot on and feel like they were taken straight out of the show. The sound design really helps accentuate the high energy feeling that the rest of the game gives off, and is an aspect of Dragon Ball FighterZ that I don't feel should be overlooked. Don't have much else to say aside from the fact that Arc Sys did a great job here. There's not a whole lot to speak of here since Dragon Ball FighterZ is pretty standard in terms of content. It has a story mode, which I already spoke about, an arcade mode, local battle, and a handful of online modes to keep you busy. You can play arena matches with your friends or other people who happen to be in your lobby, host something called a ring match to play specifically with your friends, or queue up for battles against random opponents in ranked and casual matches. One thing worth noting about ring matches is they also allow you to do 3v3s, where you can construct a team of 3 people, each using one different character, and pit them up against another team of 3 people, also each using one different character. The game also boasts a handful of tutorials and a really nice practice mode that makes it extremely easy to learn how to play the game, and if you have any interest at playing this game competitively, this is where you're going to be spending most of your time. Each character has a series of combo challenges, and most of these are admittedly extremely easy, but the last few combos that the game makes you perform with each character really do give you additional insight into how that character plays, making it a lot easier to figure stuff out with them once you take them into practice mode. The tutorial also does a pretty good job teaching you about all of the game's key mechanics and everything that you're going to need to know about to play the game competitively, though it does leave out a handful of pretty important things that you'll have to discover on your own, like tagging into other characters' supers without doing a delayed hyper combo, or, once you've entered sparking mode, canceling the attack you normally automatically do after vanishing. Stuff like that is nowhere to be found in the tutorial, but like I said, I'd still say it does a pretty good job teaching new players how to play the game. The game does seem a little bit shallow when you first pick it up, but once you really start cracking it open, I'm sure that you'll discover that there's plenty of depth there and a whole bunch of stuff to explore and practice with. Now, I don't play a lot of traditional fighters, and I certainly haven't put a whole lot of time into many of them. I think the ones that I've played the most heavily are Smash and Injustice, so I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to fighting games, but I will say the most important thing about any video game is how fun it is to play, and after a week of playing Dragon Ball FighterZ, I am still not even close to bored of it, and it's one of the only games in the past few years, actually, that's been able to so effectively suck me in as well as it has, and get me to spend so much of my time playing it and just trying to get better at it. Even if there aren't a whole lot of different game modes present in Dragon Ball FighterZ, playing with your friends or against random people is just so much fun that it's really hard to put the controller down once you start the game up. I don't think I've ever had so much fun just messing around in the practice mode of a video game before, and maybe that's because I don't play a whole lot of fighting games, but something about this one has really captured me. All of the characters are completely unique, no two fighters feel the same, all of them do something different, and so figuring out how to do some nasty combos and set up an impenetrable neutral game, all of that stuff is so much fun, and it's gonna keep me playing this game for a really long time. In case you can't already tell, I really like this game, and I'd strongly recommend it to anybody who has any interest in either competitive fighters or Dragon Ball games in general. It's an incredible game made by a team of insanely talented developers with a bunch of attention to detail and very apparent passion poured into every one of its aspects. If you have any interest in this game at all, I'd recommend at least giving it a shot. Maybe rent it or ask to play it with a friend of yours who has it. Though if you're well versed in traditional fighters and you know that you won't have a hard time picking this game up, I absolutely have to recommend it to you. Gotta get this game, it's phenomenal, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the competitive scene evolve.